state this and shut up that I liked was where he says, I hope that every single American, every single human experiences such a crisis of conscience. It is the first step to taking substantial action. And then, Lord, you said this one, our job is not to protect people from the truth or the feelings that accompany it. It's to protect them from the climate crisis. Malcolm alluded to that early on. The magic combination for motivating people, telling the truth about the scale of the crisis and the solution.
You know, thanks for your comment about, is this for the United States? I think it is, but it's purposefully that way because I think other countries that are first world countries have already gotten very involved in this. We're the only big deniers on the planet right now. So this needs to be for the United States. And even if we don't agree with some of the items, like this idea of, this doesn't talk about overconsumption as much until we get to the half Earth notice that Jeannie is talking about. And that's in here too, so.
I would like to mention though that even though we might be only deniers, other countries like undeveloped countries are saying that they simply cannot make the change because they don't have the infrastructure and they need huge influx of money. I mean, we have promised them a billion, like 1.2 billion, and of that we have promised 800 million that we have not paid. And so does she talk about that? What is required from us in terms of what we owe to these other countries?
No.
These undeveloped countries have a minor contribution to the problem.
Right.
The countries of Europe and China and India and us have a major contribution to the problem. And the only people who are not taking it seriously is us.
That's right, and we're the biggest emitters. Yeah. Anybody else comment, question? We'll move on. Okay. Transform the food system. It's responsible for about half of global greenhouse gas emissions. And then it shows production of agriculture, 11 to 15%, packaging, refrigerating, processing, 15 to 20%, food waste, 2 to 4%. And it contributes to global deforestation, as we already know. We must make a fundamental shift away from conventional agriculture. Agency will coordinate regionally, victory gardens, and then down to the bottom, agroecology is the term that most people are using nowadays. We'll also include implementation of $150 per ton carbon sequestration subsidy benefit to local economies, phasing out of factory farms, and corn ethanol mandate. Finally, increased health and well-being will emerge as changes in diet, cap on livestock production, reduction in meat consumption, and a Vegan for Victory public service campaign are established. Wheat is the most used grain in the world, though I thought it was rice, and the Land Institute in Salinas, Kansas, West Jackson, is trying to develop a perennial wheat so you don't have to plow, because tillage is one of the big problems with agriculture. Overall, the built environment, this is assistance for energy efficiency. Full employment job guarantee and World War II style tax fairness. Just mobilization for all Americans protects them from the burden of transition costs. There should be a job guarantee program. A salary cap also should be established on incomes of about $500,000 for the duration of the mobilization in order to ensure relative equality of sacrifice. I, of course, laugh that this would be so hard to imagine actually going to happen in the United States.
Well, would they be able to keep their $2 billion and then just only earn $500,000?
Right, yeah. Really, mobilize the Department of Defense to fight climate change and ecological overshoot. Department of Defense, zero emissions by 2020. Research and development shifted to environmental defense, renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy storage, plant-based substitutes for meat and dairy, and others. And that U.S. military bases abroad should be transformed to climate rescue bases that distribute emergency food and water supplies. subsidize the conversion of as much industrial capacity as feasible to the climate mobilization effort. Now, launch an emergency global forest management effort. Plants on land can absorb 20-30% of global carbon dioxide emissions every year. Management to preserve old growth combined with world effort to grow new forests on previously forested land will immediately draw down significant greenhouse gas. Public, federally managed ecosystems have innate power to help restore a safe climate, halt six-mass extinction. USDA, Department of Interior, phase out, this is so good, phase out commercial logging, fossil fuel development, mineral extraction, livestock grazing on public lands to maximize their natural carbon sequestration capability.
I have a disagreement with that. The best form of carbon sequestration that you can have is to grow a tree, cut it down, convert it into lumber, put it into a house that's going to stay there for 100 years or more. Phasing out logging is not really a good answer to this problem.
Well, as long as you replace the tree that you cut down.
Well, that's the assumption. Well, I have 2 degrees in forestry, and the first day that I was in forestry class, the professor got up there and he said, "We plant what we will not harvest, and we harvest that which we did not plant." He says, and that's the forester's creed.
So, moving on, research program on near-term cooling approaches, and this addresses geoengineering. Victory Plan does not advocate the use of these technologies, only the transparent, comprehensive research to investigate their impacts in order to educate global public. Lower risk approaches such as global restoration of water cycles should be studied as well. Near-term cooling intervention should only be considered as a method of last resort. And there's some other things in there too that are real good. Okay, drawdown research and development program. It kind of follows on that last one. Using both biological as well as chemical ways to draw down. And we read the book, Drawdown, 100 Ways to Lower Carbon Dioxide Emissions. What was that, by Paul Hawken?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, compiled it from a lot of people. That was good, a good one too. Okay, the second front, that was the first front that we've just gone over. There are only 1.5 more pages. We're almost done and we can talk more about it. Front 2, reverse ecological overshoot by slow down and reverse global population growth, phase out consumerism and planned obsolescence, considerably shrink the physical resource consumption levels of global economy and drastically increase efficiencies of production, set aside at least half the Earth's land surface and oceans for preservation, halt the further expansion of agricultural land, and restore degraded lands. Okay, here's that half-Earth conservation to halt the six-mass extinction. And I was referring to Half-Earth by Edward Wilson.
Right.
That's a good book to read. That's another one. It's not on here, but it's one I put it. If business as usual, if allowed to unfold, it would take roughly 10 million years for life to fully recover. A half-Earth conservation campaign setting aside 50% of the planet's surface as a chain of inviolable reserves will be needed to provide safety for humanity and all of the life forms with which we share the planet. Only 15% of land area and 2.8 of its oceans are currently protected. We must do that to maintain local and regional ecosystem functions as carbon sinks. We would have a natural resource environmental board, increase wildland and national parks, and national and international oversight must work to ensure biodiversity. That's the first time international had been mentioned.
I have a question about this. It seems like there are lots of indigenous peoples and peasants living on land that, are they thinking about just evicting all of these people that have lived on their lands for hundreds of thousands of years? Does Wilson talk about that?
I don't remember.
That is part of the legal manifesto. this whole.
Right, but this one, it seems like they maybe need to,
Well, we may have missed it
Thinking
because
about
this is
that.
not, this is just the executive summary,
Yeah.
so I can't speak to the
Right.
60 page. I just didn't have time to read it.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm all in favor of using half of the earth, but maybe people that are living in ways that where they live with nature instead of this way, which I think we should all be doing, living in ways that we live with nature instead of this way personally, but at least the people that are living that way should be able to continue doing so.
Well, I've read actually that supporting people who do live in a natural balance is something that is part of maintaining the system. And I don't see if a person, if a tribe is living in balance. They would have to be preserved.
Yeah, we did that study, I led the discussion on the commons. David Bolivar has written a lot on the commons, and so this is exactly what he was talking about in reference to all these lands that have been shared for eons of time, and they're being treated with the respect for the natural systems.
I think that even in their short version here, they should be saying something.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of us here agree that the indigenous outlook toward nature is one that's really highly respectful. I have friends amongst the Pueblos in New Mexico. When they heard about my tornado, one of them, who'd been the lieutenant governor of one of the Pueblos, said, Earth Mom did you a favor, didn't she? Because the insurance company paid us for the barn that it smacked down and for the shingles that came off the roof. So we were grateful to Earth Mom, as he said, Mother Earth. Slow down and reverse global population growth. And it's a campaign to educate people on that, is what's mentioned in conclusion. They say this isn't a substitute for reading the entire work. They'll need feedback. Policy technology options will change. In the current state, the Victory Plan is a first draft, first of its kind, a comprehensive society-wide policy proposal to save human civilization and the biodiversity of the Earth. Must have massive support of the people of the U.S. and international support. Because local and state mobilization provide a foundation for national and international action. Policymakers, U.S. activists, and power readers across the globe are encouraged to implement this plan in their own context while generating support for global climate mobilization. We need not wait for a climate Pearl Harbor. Or would that be Harvey? Then there's the action we must mobilize now.
Let's hope.
Yeah, thank you all for going through all of this here. I think this is really important. And I hope that you'll go on to the Climate Mobilization website and look at this. And maybe take time to look at the 60-page one. That's kind of frightening to me. But this shorter version, I think, gets us thinking about sectors of culture that can be worked on and how they can be worked on. As she mentioned several different times, this isn't set in stone. This is a beginning, and it can change. It's just a beginning pattern. And I bet, Dick, that yours will be that too, and I think Jeannie's will also be. Because yours is on transforming, and Jeannie's is on subsistence perspective. So we've got a lot of incoming
We have a big variety
information right now.
in our
And then Malcolm's
programs.
what we see of the opposition. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming. Anybody else with a comment specific to the Victory Plan?
Could you scroll back just a little bit further?
Sure.
There were some subheads there that I was trying to get down my list.
Okay. There's one.
The ones that were under the overshoot, diversity from overshoot.
Oh, yeah, I bet you that's it. Those 5 or 6 items are real good ones. So what do you all think about this Victory Plan? Is it, I mean, it seems very unrealistic as to who in the world in our culture is going to want to do this. The Congress of today would say, this is a fool's errand. What in the world are you thinking about? But we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think the current government in our country and several others is profit-oriented. They think only about economics. They're not concerned about what the economic security of a few. They don't care about the effect that has on other people that don't have those options. And if getting rich means continuing to drill for oil and go into places that have previously been protected, just to go and increase the wealth of the oil magnates. When we're dealing with this, these are people who won't even talk about protecting the environment or following any kind of plan that would improve the earth. They're very happy just taking what they can and damn the consequences.
Made me wonder if they're gonna all fly to Mars with Elon Musk.
Yeah, they're talking
And leave us
about,
behind.
and I think what
They
they,
believe that their
They can
wealth
leave now.
will protect them.
right now,
From the
there's no
effects.
water, they don't know if there's any potable water on Mars, there's no breathable air. They have to, if they bring it with them, they have to bring it from Earth. And what happens when we destroy the Earth, then where are they gonna get their air and water?
Well, actually, there are enormous deposits of ice on Mars, which can be turned into oxygen and used for various other purposes.
But is it
Like, you know,
H2O?
it's-
I mean, is it?
But, you know, colonization of Mars is, which I'm all for, because we're running out of the planet, and we need a new, you know, a safety, you know, something that we can do to ensure that if we ruin this planet and humans do go extinct here, at least there's somewhere else in the universe. But, you know, we have no, right now, there is no possibility that we will colonize Mars, because the Trump administration says, well, let's cut NASA's appropriation in half. You know, they don't need that money. We need it to give tax breaks to the billionaires.
In my opinion, what they think they're gonna do is a little bit more macabre than that, because I think they think that their money's gonna protect them, and there's a group of them that feel like they are the worthy people in the culture. So they're gonna create a situation where they can be protected and wait until the rest of the population dies out, so that they can
all over
repopulate.
again.
Well, they all mentioned population reduction. I wonder how it will come. Through
Well,
plagues,
that's
bombs.
kind of scary, because, you know, how do we get, since they're in the positions of power, I guess it would take environmentally conscious people to get more positions in the government, at least the way things are now. And they seem to have an awful lot of support from an awful lot of really ignorant people.
Over the years, we've allowed corporations to take over, and I think that's actually the shadow government. It's
Yes.
corporate power.
Oh,
And we've
yeah.
seen what the present administration has done with fossil fuels.
Yeah,
Can I mention again the thing at on Saturday night? You know, there was only one candidate in the last election that had a progressive plan that really talked about a World War II scale environmental plan. That was Bernie Sanders. And there's going to be a conference, People's Convergence. It's going to be live streamed to the Omni Center Saturday night, a week from last night, from 6 to 9 p.m. And the purpose of it is to decide at a national level with a lot of progressive people represented, and hopefully Bernie Sanders will be there, whether the direction that gives us the best chance in the future is to form a third party, a People's Party, or to continue to reform the Democratic Party. And wherever you feel on that argument, I think this is a good chance to hear the debate.
that makes sense. Yeah.
So what do you all think? Some more about, in response to the overall article, to the articles today. Terry, do you have any comment on it?
Well, one thing in this last presentation, it talks about, one estimate is that 50% of greenhouse gases are from agriculture. Well, that's one estimate, and that's not the most common estimate. That's badly overstating the agriculture as the source of greenhouse gases. The main sources of greenhouse gases are burning fossil fuels. So And in fact, in the US, I think agriculture is responsible for about 6 or 7%.
I think
When the US is
when they do
in
that
the-
50% figure, they're including all of the food processing, all of the transportation, all of the fossil fuels that are being used in agriculture. And by the time you do all that, it does come up nearly
Yeah.
50%, you know, rather than just looking at this narrow
That's
picture of
including
agriculture.
the use of
It
fossil
includes all of food, you know, and all of the livestock, and it's just much.
Transportation.
But
Yeah.
calling it agriculture is misleading, at least. You know, I think, that they're focused on broad strokes and not specific things that we can do. I think there are a lot of specific things that we can do. You know, it's possible to have a net zero home. I have.
Like you do.
It's possible to use electricity for transportation now. 5% of California's vehicles being sold are now electric. And China has a goal for 8% of the vehicles being sold in 2018 in China being electric. You know, that there are other problems. That's not a perfectly clean solution. But for instance, we all came here and, you know, maybe 2 people to a car or something like that today. Within a few years, there's the possibility of self-driving cars, self-driving electric vehicles. Imagine if that were our option today to come here, and how that would change just Fayetteville. You know, how many parking spaces wouldn't be needed? How many, you know, it would change the way our city looks. And yet I went to, I think it was Wednesday, I went to the mayor of Springdale talking about infrastructure spending in Springdale. And he was proud of the grid plan that he's got for transportation and kind of being mildly critical of Fayetteville's plan of having a kind of a belt approach for faster moving traffic, and then the rest of the grid being slow. So he's happy about having a grid plan, which is business as usual. And just all of the space that we have wasted, for one thing, in Fayetteville, and worse in places like Springdale, in the plans. I don't know, I just think that there are, you know, this is broad brush strokes, and we need to be much more specific, especially in our own backyard.
Do you know that, can I interrupt here and ask you a
Please.
question? You
Yeah.
seem to be slowing down there. What's the difference between smart grid and super grid? Can you paint that in a very few brush strokes or?
I don't know, I have a guess, but no, I haven't. I'm not
Well, do you
familiar
think
with those
they're at
terms.
least, then another question here. You're pretty high tech in everything that you've done and managed to come to zero energy at your house and drive an electric vehicle. Do you think that that can be the solution though for the majority of people? Let's just talk about the United States.
No, I think they're right that public transportation is a much more practical solution. But electrification of transportation is important, and offering alternatives to people that capture the imagination, I think, is important. But no, I don't think that everybody living like I do is practical. It's just not. I think it can help capture the imagination.
From your studies and your professional background, what's your concept of how fast things can happen? When we're saying 3 to 10 years to get a handle on it to mitigate.
To get to zero, no. we've already stopped accelerating our emissions in the US. We've gotten to a point, electricity use has been flat for a decade. Electricity generation and use in the US, while our population has grown, largely due to immigration, but partly naturally. So while all of this is happening and while our economy is growing, we've been able to decouple the relationship between economic growth and greenhouse gas emissions. That's been proven that we can decouple that. Now we have to work on reversing it. And the speed at which that happens, Tony Seba gives the example that I showed in my presentation Saturday of New York City in the year 1900, for the Easter parade on Fifth Avenue, where there was one car.
Right.
One car, New York City, Easter parade, 1900. 1913, there were no horses. Zero horses. So in 13 years, the technology had converted from one technology to another. So it's possible.
What do you think is the most important item that could be done? Is it federal subsidies of distributed electricity, solar panels on everything else? What would be something that could be done feasibly for most people or families?
An acknowledgement, unfortunately, very few people in Fayetteville are really having this discussion, let alone the rest of the country. I think the first thing to do is to convince people that that Harvey that the damage of Harvey was accentuated by